After I began taking medication, I began to feel much better. I enjoyed things that I was not enjoying before. The sadness, the despair lifted.
I had forgotten the little joys of doing that. I went and bought bubbles and I went and bought crayons. All I wanted to do was see bright colors, and I wanted to do things that just kind of were simple and made you laugh.
For the first time in my life, I'm very hopeful. I'm hopeful, period. Which is, I've never felt that before.
The people you have just seen all share one thing in common. They were all diagnosed with clinical depression. They had the courage to seek treatment, and today they are all survivors. I'm Kathy Cronkite, and I know what they've been through because I've been there too. If you are one of the millions of Americans who suffer from depression, you are not alone. What's important to remember is that depression is a real disease, just like diabetes or heart disease. It is treatable. Thousands, if not millions, of men and women have gone on to lead highly productive and normal and successful lives in spite of debilitating depression. Depression can happen to anyone, at any age, at any time. Approximately 10% of our population is depressed in any one year. 1 in 5 people in America will experience an episode of depression at some point in their lifetime. Depression also takes many forms. It can occur out of the blue, for no apparent reason, or it can be triggered by some particular crisis. Some people experience only one episode in a lifetime. For others, depression is recurring, even continuous. It is also a disease that cuts across all social and economic groups. Joan Rivers, William Styron, Mike Wallace, Dick Cavett, Kitty Dukakis, they have all struggled against the debilitating effects of depression. Winston Churchill called depression a black dog that tormented him throughout his life. William Styron described depression as a wimp of a word for an affliction that amounts to nothing less than a howling tempest in the brain. Mike Wallace described it as a feeling lower than a snake's belly.
It is the worst disease imaginable. It's invisible, and it's very haunting, and it's persistent, and it's anguishing, and it's chronic, and it's life-threatening.
Well, the most painful part, I think, was the overwhelming despair, just overwhelming despair. I remember drawing an analogy of being on an island, wanting to die, but there was enough berries and things that I could forage to keep me alive. Wanting to die, but I had to stay alive.
When I was in the early stages of depression, I would pile more work, more commitments, and more activities onto my schedule, afraid that if I sat down to catch my breath, depression would overcome me. I read later and later into the night, knowing that when I finally turned the light off, sleep would not come. I saw the world through dark-tinted glasses. My house was a wreck, my children monsters, my marriage in trouble, and on and on.
Depression is not a symptom. It's actually a set of symptoms. It's a syndrome, is actually the way we would refer to it.
When I was depressed, I kept remembering all of my mistakes, all of my shortcomings, never my accomplishments, but all of the things I had done wrong, thought I should have done better.
I will spend all day in bed. I don't get up. I don't like to get out and I don't want to be seen.
Decreased energy is very commonly seen in depression. Trouble concentrating, trouble at work because of concentration.
It's almost like they lose the ability to see color. Everything is gray and black and heavy, and they just turn anything that happens into a negative, or only see the negative side of it.
One of the features of depression is that the mood state tends to be autonomous. That is, it goes on and on, more or less unresponsive to life events. And so people on the one hand know they should be feeling something different. If they experience a joyful event and they can't feel it, it's the discrepancy between what you know you should be feeling and what you're feeling.
Depression not only takes its toll on its victims, it also takes an enormous toll on family members and friends. Loved ones often become involuntary witnesses, watching helplessly as the person they thought they knew is gradually transformed. And not only is it difficult for family members to know what to do or how to help, sometimes the family is completely unaware.
I did hide it from my family because we were strong believers in you work hard, save, and try to get ahead, and you don't complain.
Well, it was very devastating to them, especially my parents. Trying to figure out what they did wrong, or what could have been done differently.
Relationship totally changed. It wasn't like we were husband and wife. It was like I was all alone, and I was taking care of her like she was my child.
Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Those words of advice would never be given to sufferers of other medical illnesses. Yet all too often, victims of depression are told if they can just pull themselves out of it, they'll be all right. Mildred Reynolds suffered from depression for over 30 years, starting back in the early 60s when very little was known about the disease. Sheila Singleton lost 10 years of her life before she was properly diagnosed and treated. Over a 10-year period that began when he was a senior in high school, Jerome Brewster was hospitalized numerous times. For 24 years, I didn't even know I had an illness. I simply thought I was crazy, or bad, or lacking in discipline. But we all share something in common. Once we received the proper diagnosis, we were on the road to recovery. From that moment on, there was relief. There was hope.
Once I was diagnosed, that was a relief to me, to have a name for it, to have it identified.
I kept beating myself up, why can't I do this? Why can't I just get beyond this? And I realize now that it's the disease.
No one knows exactly what causes depression. Research has shown that genetics is an important factor and that depression runs in families. We also know that certain stressful life events, such as the loss of a loved one or a major life change, can trigger an episode of depression. And as we've learned more about the chemical imbalances in the brain that are associated with depression, newer, more specific medications have been developed to treat it.
There seems to be a common link through the neurotransmitter serotonin, which is a brain chemical that influences a number of important brain functions. And in particular, many of those that are involved with depression, such as appetite changes and sleep changes and so forth. A variety of treatments that influence serotonin seem to be effective in treating mood and anxiety disorders.
With the release of the SSRIs, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are Paxil and Prozac and Zoloft, we've had just an amazingly wonderful new weapon in our war against depression. These are very safe drugs, these are very well-tolerated medications, and they work very well in the treatment of depression.
When my doctor prescribed an antidepressant, I was hesitant to have my prescription filled. I knew what it felt like to feel depressed. I didn't know how it would feel to be medicated. What would it do to me? Would it slow me down or make me feel groggy? Would I still be me? It was a fear of the unknown. You also have to be patient, because while you may be waiting anxiously for this medication to do something and wishing for instant results, the SSRIs just don't work that way.
Unfortunately, no antidepressant works immediately. Every antidepressant needs to be used for at least several weeks before any relief of depressive symptoms will occur. At the very least 2 weeks. Many times it may be 4 to 6 weeks before a person gets a really significant amount of relief. Therefore, it's critically important for physicians and patients to discuss this factor and to stick with it.
For many people, the older generation of antidepressants brought with it side effects that some patients found intolerable. The advantage of the SSRIs is that they're more comfortable for most people.
The short-term side effects of SSRIs are incredibly manageable. They are very well-tolerated medications. Some people will have a little GI upset. It's possible they may have a headache. early on in the course. The vast majority of those symptoms will go away within several days to several weeks of taking the medication.
For some people, side effects will be more troublesome. Others will experience no side effects at all. And of course, it's vitally important to discuss any side effects with your doctor.
If you're able to feel good, and have a dry mouth, during the day, that's probably a fair trade-off there.
Even patients who develop side effects with these drugs tend to adapt to them and be able to successfully complete their treatment trial.
We are each unique chemical and psychological beings. A treatment that's ineffective or difficult for one person may be a lifesaver for another. The important thing to remember is that there are many treatment options, including talk therapy and medication. And with perseverance, virtually everyone can be successfully treated. Eventually, I did have my prescription filled. And within a few weeks, I experienced a feeling I hadn't known for 24 years. I knew what it felt like to feel normal.
The first thing that happened was the anxiety began to lift, and then the depression began to lift. But it was slow and gradual, and what some people don't realize is that you really need to take it for a while before it will be effective.
And I used to keep account of the days on a scale of 1 to 10. And when the days started getting 7s, then I knew that maybe we were headed in the right direction.
The only thing, of all the things we did and went through, and she went through psychotherapy, she pushed herself and exercised a lot. She changed her diet at times. But the bottom line was the only thing that made a difference was finding the right medication, the right combination of chemicals to take care of the deficit that she had in her brain.
I have been on medication for more than 6 years now. Occasionally, I used to fool myself that I was cured and cut back on my medication, but the depression would return in full force.
The problem is that once that patient feels back to normal, they may stop their medication. And if they stop their medication, the vast majority of patients will get depressed again. So it's critically important that patients remain on an antidepressant at an effective dose for at least 6 months after they get better.
To prevent recurrence for many patients, you need to stay on the medicine even beyond the point when you're feeling better. In that sense, it's more like treating high blood pressure, where your blood pressure may be normal, but you have to stay on your blood pressure medication, your antihypertensive, for a long period of time, in some cases indefinitely.
I feel very comfortable giving patients a very hopeful message. The vast majority of patients with depression are going to get better. And if they get depressed again, we can treat that depression again, and we may actually be able to treat them so that their episodes of depression don't recur.
If you have been diagnosed with clinical depression, you have already demonstrated courage. You had the courage to seek treatment. You have taken the first step towards recovery. And as you continue on the road to recovery, never forget that what you are suffering is a real medical disease. With a name, it's called depression. And with the proper treatment, it is something you can live with. Remember, you are not alone. There is help, and there is hope.
Once she got her medication in balance, it's like she got her life back. It's like she's a whole person again and could function and experience happiness and hope.
It's so important to get help and stay with it until you find something that works for you. And in all probability, you will find something that works for you if you stay with it.
You almost have to get mad. You have to get mad at this illness that's taken over your life and say, no, it's my turn. There's things to do, places to go, and people to see. And I'm going to fight until one of us falls, and it's not going to be me.
That little pill means so much to me. I think of it, I compare it with a stone, a gem, and there is no piece of jewelry that I would trade my pills for. It means that much to me.
I can say that I'm actually beginning to enjoy some things. And that's neat. I like it.